Welcome to the Rule of Law, the Academy Speaks. I'm your host, Craig Peters, the president-elect of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers. And today our topic is seeing bias and bias in the jury system. I'm pleased to have with us a current professor of law at the University of Missouri, but someone who has also lived a life as a trial lawyer as well as corporate counsel. And he received his JD from Georgetown, his undergraduate degree in economics and political science at Yale. Please welcome Professor Chuck Henson. Thanks for being here.
Greg, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Of course. This is, I think, a really fascinating topic. It's interesting that you've kind of lived multiple lives in different areas of the law. I, too, have lived sort of different lives in the law. I was a criminal defense lawyer for almost a decade and a half and now do civil work. And so this issue of bias and specifically implicit bias is one that has been kind of at the forefront of my practice from my early days because of my criminal defense work. And so I'd just love for you if you can share with the public and any lawyers that might be listening, kind of generally what is implicit bias? What do we know about it? What kind of research has there been done on it? And then we can start talking about how that might impact the way that we practice as lawyers.
Well, so implicit bias, and it's a great question. The basic distinction is we have conscious biases. We're conscious of them. We act on them consciously. I don't like tomatoes that are not in a pasta sauce. I am biased against them. I do like ice cream by the pint. I'm biased in favor of that, okay? But when we get to the idea of implicit, what we're talking about are unknown reasons for why we might respond, react, or behave towards or interpret another person. Why do we do that? Okay. Now, I will say, Craig, bias gets a bad rap, right? I did the against tomatoes and for ice cream. Everybody has biases. And what we know is that everyone is subject to implicit biases. So the most famous work is the work of Banaji and Greenwald that produces a book called Blind Spot. And the key information is it's the hidden biases of good people. Okay. Always key to remember that. The idea is we don't know that these biases are acting on us. So it doesn't make us bad that we have them. It makes us human. Others have written in this area. I believe I mentioned to you at a presentation I did earlier where we met, Shankar Vedantam's Hidden Brain. He wrote a book and he has this lovely podcast that talks a little bit about what's going on that we are not aware of, thus hidden brain. Banaji and Greenwald call it mind bugs. They're there, they're active. Daniel Kahneman and even Tversky in their kind of founding of behavioral economics. Well, these guys are clinical psychologists who are studying behavioral choices. Why do people do what they do? And, Kahneman talks about it as a system one and a system two. And system one is this very automatic system, right? It's always doing. And system two is our deliberative mind, the one where we can do math. And his conclusion, and I'm paraphrasing wildly, his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, is 600 pages, right?
Yeah.
Wild paraphrase. Just because we know that we can do the math, we have convinced ourselves that we are always doing it, rather than understanding. No, for the most part, when we're asked, why did you do something? We don't know, but we're very, very quick to come up with the answer, oh, it was because. And so how does it get in there? I suppose might be the next question.
Yeah. Well,
And
and we actually see that for those of us who try cases and then go through the painful exercise of talking to jurors afterwards, trying to figure out why they did what they did. You oftentimes get these, oh, well, we did it because of X, Y, and Z. You're like, well, wait, but that doesn't really make any sense, right? Like, but it makes perfect sense to them. Yeah. So why do we have? Why does this thing exist? And by the way, before we get to that. I think sometimes there might be a feeling that implicit bias is a theory. Is it a theory or is it a fact?
it's a fact. Um,
And
so
how do we know that?
because there have been studies of whether Bernanke and Greenwald's data is good data. So analyzing all of the data. So uh, there are there are people out there who question whether it's real. Um, the science is solid behind it, and that's been good enough for me, and good enough for most people as far as accepting the concept that it exists versus internalizing the reality that I have it and it's influencing me. But why is it there? Um, I know you remember being a trial lawyer back when you were a caveman, right? And you had to respond pretty quickly and make judgments pretty fast for self-preservation. So you and I are standing there, and our buddy Zog gets eaten by this giant monster. And what you and I noticed was before it happened, loud noises, right? So every time we hear a loud noise, we run away instead of waiting to figure out, okay, this time is it a monster? Um, so as a process of survival, we start to take data and in a way condense it, internalize it, and stop looking for additional data that might change our conclusions. And so that's the process. We become part of a culture. We're born into a culture and we learn the things in the culture. And whatever images of good or bad, we incorporate those. And we make judgments about people we see based on what has been incorporated. And it's funny. There's not like an implicit bias DNA, but that's the strength that it has to cause any person to make judgments about another person. Um, there's this wonderful Anderson Cooper video about the baby lab at Yale and trying to figure out, are babies prejudiced natively, right? No, they're not prejudiced, but they have opinions and they have thoughts and they have feelings. And so a baby who likes Cheerios confronted with a puppet who also likes Cheerios will say to themselves, okay, that guy thinks like me. I have that data. And therefore, we're alike. Anything the puppet does, the one that likes Cheerios, even if it's terrible, I'm picking that guy for my team. But over time, we don't have time. We believe we do not have the time to accumulate more data about new people. And so we rely on what's been incorporated, largely not our own doing, okay, on how do I react? And we react, okay, so what is that called? It's called a stereotype. And what's the reaction called? Well, it has emotional content. And I don't know why I decided not to get on that elevator with you, but something about you said to me, I shouldn't get on the elevator with you. Some people have experienced it this way. Walking down the street, got my foulard on and I got my snappy summer hat on and I'm walking down the street. That's how I walk, right? And I see somebody who is not like me. Um, Nice looking white lady with her kid and her handbag, and I watch her body pull her bag and her child to her to give me room. And my conclusion is that is a very painful experience for her. And she doesn't know why she did that.
Yeah.
So it's there, it's embedded.
Well, and it's interesting because it's not only almost like a hardwired kind of part of our brain that uses this as a defense mechanism, or at least at one point in time did. It also seems to me that it has a natural joining point with this idea that the way in which our brains operate is in stories. So we have limited information that we act on quite quickly, which then leads to a whole story, right? So she may not, and I learned this actually from an actor in LA who had come to our office to do some trainings. And the first thing he said is to a guy sitting in front, he's like, "What'd you think about me when I came in the room?" And the guy's like, I don't know. He's like, no, you did. Just tell me what it is. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Tell me what it is. And suddenly he started going around the room and it was amazing, right? Everybody had a story about this guy that we didn't know the first thing about. So we were taking implicit bias.
Right.
Few facts we knew. He was from LA. He was an actor. He wasn't a trial lawyer. And then putting those actually into a story about who this guy was that we knew. It's kind of a fascinating, if you can allow yourself to sort of feel a little I mean, I felt ashamed about it. I don't anymore because I recognize that's just how our brains work. But it's a little off-putting to ourselves to recognize that, I think.
That's right. So Benaji herself, as she's inventing these tests with Greenwald, she's got a PhD, right? She's a professional woman. She discovers that she has a very strong implicit bias against professional women. There's in the implicit bias law world, you probably know who this is, Mark Bennett. He was a judge on the Southern District of Iowa Federal Court. Big proponent of getting the ideas and information about implicit bias into the legal sphere. He takes the race, black, white, implicit association tests and is mortified and shocked to find out how strong his implicit biases are against black people. And that's the other thing about it. It's there, and it is generally inconsistent with our beliefs about ourselves. So one of the reasons you asked real quick, you asked this question about, I mean, is it real? Is it science? I think one of the reasons for a hesitation to accept it or even to reject it is, I know that I'm not a racist. Well, no one's accusing you of overt racism. That's explicit bias. Okay. The idea here is, I know you believe that you're a good person, but this is in there and it's working on you, and you just don't know it. And
So what do we do about that? I want to, at some point we'll have a link to some of these tests if people want to take them. But let's assume, because I think probably science will back us up on this. We've all got implicit bias, ones that many of us would not like to have. So what do you do if it's happening kind of underneath our conscious level? How do we confront that?
okay, well, there are two things that you can do, and this is where to start, right? You can either just tell yourself, yes, I have it, and assume that it is strong. And the test measures strength level, existence and strength level, either for or against. Okay. You can just assume it, or you can take the test. right? And then once you have taken that step, then the science tells us you never get rid of it. It's impossible to strip out of any one of us, or hopefully acculturation is a word, right? Uh, what's been embedded in us since we were kids and we've grown up in, and we've watched the movies and we've watched TV and we watch the news, right? It's there, nothing to be done. What you can do is prime yourself against it. And so, Banaji, she discovers this terrible bias against professional women. She sets up her computer so that the screensaver is rotating images of professional women that are positive to her to help prime herself positively towards a group that she has implicit biases against. And that's a key thing to do. Prime yourself. You can't get, and the other key thing to do is give yourself grace, because you can't get rid of it. Priming, eat more, eat more. Kahneman tells us, Kahneman tells us we make better judgments when our brain isn't starved. And the studies that he did of judicial decisions in Israel that were made immediately after the panel ate versus when they were hungry is a lovely testament to do not try to judge people, situations, events on an empty stomach, because that's going to be a problem. What else can we do?
Before we go, I want to hear more. But as it relates to the priming issue, so you gave us a good example of I mean, I guess you could do that for any implicit bias that you might find that you have by doing the tests. Are there other ways to prime beyond putting them on your computer screen, or that are sort of known, scientifically tested ways that help to decrease the adverse impacts of implicit bias?
Well, anything that falls under that heading, okay? Because the implicit bias isn't activated only when you see someone. It can be activated when someone describes someone else to you. And if you, I mean, in this country, we got a lot of different accents, right? Okay. So there is a stereotypical Black accent. If you hear that person without knowing anything else about them, and you have the Black-white bias, right? That's going to activate just by hearing the voice. Okay. Anything that would be a parallel to, let me have these positive images, okay, would work in the same way to prime for positive reaction. So I don't know. I think everybody in the world likes Morgan Freeman's voice or James Earl Jones's voice. Okay. So there's an idea for you. Listen to your favorite audiobook as read by that kind of person. But keeping in mind that what this priming does is allows it not to kick in as fast. It gives you critical time as you practice to focus on not the stereotype, but the actual person enough so that the likelihood is that you avoid acting on the bias, the implicit bias. But that's as good as it gets.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's maybe like a lot of things people are afflicted by. It's, the first step is recognizing that this is an issue that at least moves it closer to the forefront of your consciousness. But then there's, using mechanisms to reinforce that. That seems like a really easy thing to do but of course, again, you need to take the test, because the test results have surprising outcomes for people, I think.
They do.
Is that,
And again, it goes
yeah,
to the idea that my views, I'm not a bigot, right? Uh,
yeah,
and then confronted with your internal mechanism, which is in complete conflict with your self-description, right? And there are a lot of studies about that. Again, Mark Bennett, his work among the judiciary and people involved in the criminal justice system, there is an amazing proportion of those people who believe in their ability to be completely free of bias. A statistically improbable number conclude, oh, yes, nothing, none of these biases influence my decisions. No, that they can't, it just can't be.
yeah. Well, and so if let's, so that I think this has been really helpful, kind of big picture. We've all got this. Doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or anybody else. We've all got it. So have you? I'm sure you. By the way, you teach on this subject,
Right.
correct? Yeah. And I think if I remember correctly, you said when you were involved as corporate counsel, this was, I assume there was a lot of the implicit bias issues that you were dealing with in that job as well, or did that
No, that time predates my time. I know that
okay.
I look like I'm about 25. it, it predates.
That's the story I'm telling for sure.
There we go. Tell you what, you shave all the hair off, de-ages you. Um, so if I can say it this way, the rise of the implicit bias awareness postdates my time in-house.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I come to it almost, well, exclusively as a law professor, teacher, right?
Mhm.
And in some ways, that's been a good thing because I have the time to explore and think about and read and then present and receive input and improve my ideas about what's happening. Um, so the teaching that I've been doing about it has been a part of the rise of implicit bias awareness.
Yeah. And I imagine because of your prior life and now with this current life and this being so much a part of what you're doing, have you given, I'm sure you've given some thought to the effects of implicit bias on the decisions that get made in a case before it ever gets to trial, or maybe even before it even gets accepted by a law firm. Can you sort of share your thoughts about how our own implicit bias may be affecting our practices in terms of case selection, case decisions, those sorts of things?
Absolutely. First point is it is. It is affecting our practice. Okay. Um, so all of the same mechanisms are working. It doesn't matter that we are now focused on what we do. Okay. So if somebody walks in and it's by Western standards. Now, this is important. Standards are different, and beauty has a lot to do with symmetry overall. By Western standards, a very, very pretty woman walks in. Okay, uh, you're more apt to believe this person. You're more apt to really move heaven and earth to make it happen, despite the fact that if you're accepting a client under our rules, then you have a fiduciary duty. Doesn't matter what they look like, right? Um, because because of the association with the stereotype that you have and the emotional attitude that you take toward this person. Very positive. You're going to feel good about it. I don't care if all she says to you are lies. Okay. Versus a very dark skinned black woman who is heavy comes in. What's going to happen is you are going to doubt this person. when you look at their face, you'll interpret ambiguity in a negative way. The reality, we're talking about reality here, right, Craig? So, am I going to do as good a job for the one as I will for the other? The reality is probably not. Not because I'm consciously deciding I'm going to give you less of my lawyer self because of my implicit bias. No, you never made that decision because it was implicitly activated. But the reality of the doubt that you're going to have about one client versus the other is scientifically based. There's a study out there. It's called Written in Black and White. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So, right. So they decided to study, I think it's in New York City, 60 law firm partners are given a memo written by a completely fictitious third-year associate in their law firm. The credentials for the associate went to NYU, one of the top-ranked schools in the country. They've been at the law firm for 3 years. Their name is completely bland name, Tom Jones, Tom Smith, okay? Half of the people were told Tom Smith is black. Half of the people are told Tom Smith is white. Now, the researchers embedded mistakes in the memo. What in the pool that were just told this fictitious person was black, they found more mistakes than even were embedded in the memo on purpose because of implicit confirmation bias, the bias that says black people can't write well, they don't communicate well. For white Tom Smith, they found far fewer mistakes. And then their interpretation of the errors. Black Tom Smith gets a letter grade of D. White Tom Smith gets a letter grade of B. Black Tom Smith, I can't believe he went to NYU. How are they working here? White Tom Smith shows a lot of promise. Okay. I think that's really strong evidence that it's influencing how we do our work, not only for the clients, but as we interpret the people who we work with.
Right. Well, and I think there's two challenges with this issue as it relates to how law firms operate. I think one is what you mentioned earlier, which is everybody says, but I'm not black. I mean, yeah, that's what happened in that study with those people, but I'm different from those people. Right. So you can other the issue,
right,
which makes it not your problem.
Right.
And the second is that going back to sort of the clients who walk in, right, there's this duality, I think, that trial lawyers need to live in, where we need to recognize our own bias and fight against it in order to make sure that the system is doing the justice that we've, I think, all sworn to uphold in whatever state we happen to practice in. But then there's the piece that says, but I got to get a jury of 12 people, 6 people, 8 people, 9 people, whatever it is, to agree on this. Right. And going back to your example, people are biased against people who are overweight. People are biased against Black people. People are, let's throw some more stereotypes on there. Lives in a poor part of town or lives in the project, right? Like, so now we're trying to simultaneously say, I'm not going to let that affect me and my judgment. I'm going to try and do justice for this person while also trying to figure out how to get over what I also know, because I maybe have some myself, or maybe even if I'm not willing to admit it, at least admit that other people have it, and try to get them over that hump. And do you have how did you deal with that when you were practicing and trying cases? What's the secret sauce there?
Tune in next week for part 2 of our podcast, Implicit Bias on Trial.